Day 1. Please let me go, said the rabbit-eared maiden, struggling from a group of 4 men grappling her in their tight grip. They laughed and snarled while they ripped her periwinkle robe, fitting for an Alana mage. Just stand still, half-born freak. Let me and the boys see how bald you are underneath. The Centalope leader said, with an unnerving hunger, swirling his rouge blade playfully. He stared at her filled legs, fitting tightly in her tights. They spread her legs with sickening smiles. She didn't understand why he was acting this way, because they were the same race, even if it was only half. She thrashed and contorted her body in the dark alley, watching as the pedestrians acknowledged her distress. Yet the triangle had no heroes. She heard stories about the residents of the triangular lands, how brass and cruel they are. Yet it stung more that it was the herbivorous races causing her harm, especially the ones she trusted for 2 weeks. Why are you doing this, Riggs? I thought you said we herbivores stick together. She wept, remembering not too long ago that he offered a helping hand with a warm smile. The journey was a tough one right off the ship from Alana, where she was conned out of her money, and the local wildlife craved her skin. Every day was a trial of survival, running away while she tangoed with adversaries, using her natural earth magic. The white-haired Centalope was a gifted mage, proud as she flicked her rabbit ears with pride. Timid in nature, but the cowardly did not get any pity in the triangle or the coin. It was a tiring week for the young lady. Even if she had the speed of a harefolk, her human side lacked the stamina to continue without rest. In the settlement of Tuskgate is where her sole adventure ends, as she sold her father's smithed sword for entry. She finally felt safe in the gated community, but it was apparent that she couldn't stay within its walls without coins. The carnivorous beastkin eyed her like a slab of roasting meat, waiting for their chance to pounce at any moment. She paced herself around the town, looking for a way to escape the upcoming threats. She frantically scanned her surroundings, oblivious of the figure walking into her. They collided. Being a scholar before an athlete meant that she was the one who toppled over. She fell on her plumb rear, bouncing slightly as the sting of the gravel lingered on her ashen tail. Her ruby eyes teared up as she looked up at the figure that offered her a hand. It was a brown-haired Centalope male with pleasant features and sincere gray eyes. His garb was appealing to the eye, wearing pristine leather armor with accents of light blue. She blushed, for she found the Centalope male rather handsome. He resembled a dashing rogue from a novel series she read back in her homeland. His smile had dimples that melted her heart, filling her ignorant eyes with love at first sight. He would later tell her honeyed words and sweet aspirations, like telling her that their kind should stick together. Her once favorable memory of the Centalope male known as Riggs was sullied by the man who looms over her now. Man, you really are such a dumb bitch, really showing your human side right now. Riggs taunted with the same smile that warmed her heart. The only difference now is that she notices the malicious intent behind it. Her insecurities swelled, for even now she was looked down upon for being a half-born. The white rabbit's eyes glazed with fresh tears, betrayed by the male she had admired for the past 2 weeks. Even with this demon's aid, she survived the triangle all the way to this point. She wasn't letting her chastity be ruined now. She remembered the words of power, the words that protected her from the horrors of the triangle. She charged up her mana core, filling it with her will. Eratacibus fiamis, ad solum compactum. Before she uttered her words of power, a large palm wrapped around her mouth. It was strong. A little squeeze from his grip could make her neck pop. She had enough movement from her neck to look up at the towering shadow behind her. She broke out in a cold sweat, knowing full well who the culprit was. "Ah, your little hot breaths on my hand make me so hard, but I can't let you say another word, Missy," the deep voice told her while she felt a large prick on her back. Her stomach turned, knowing full well what the protrusion was. His hand reeks of mail. The white rabbit looked in horror from the hulking mass that hovered over her, noticing the large tusk of a Bultarus. The otherworlders would call them minotaurs, lacking the strictly bovine appearance from their stories. He was twice her size in both height and width, with vein muscles tightening his simple tunic and trousers. Bultarus males are even feared by the carnivores, having the power behind their muscles to easily rip the head off a centalope. "You can have some of this when I'm done. You Bultarus boys are borderline killing bitches with your meat. Matter of fact, tame yourself. We don't want her to lose her value." Riggs pointed his knife at the hulking man in frustration, because it seemed like it had happened before. It irritated the white rabbit that her words could not be heard by the Lord of Order, showing her how much of a novice she actually was. Legendary mages can summon spells with just their hearts alone. She could really be more seasoned right about now. Can't blame the big guy, even if she's a dirty mix. Seeing her plump ass wiggling around with every hop makes a male wonder. The goon holding her leg said, licking his lips playfully. She felt his disgusting hand creep up her rear, reaching for her tail with a forceful grip. He pulled it to reveal its true length, stroking it with pleasure to her discomfort. She was getting tired from her struggle, as they caught her when she was already drained from stamina. They spent all night moving boulders from a nearby mountain trail, clearing the blockade for a local town. They left her to do the work, almost like they planned for her to expend her mana. Yesterday evening, the Bultarus male was oddly absent. He wasn't absent enough now, as she felt the warm goo spreading on her back. She heard the Bultarus moan loudly, relieving his tension all over her back. The sappy liquid made her back twitch. She tried her best to flood her mind with theorems in an attempt to ignore the gross sludge that her mind knew. "Sorry, Riggs, she is so soft, and I couldn't help it when she was rubbing on the end of my shaft," the Bultarus said, rubbing the back of his head with the free hand. The smell became deeper as she realized that it was the man's seed. Enough, Riggs yelled as he closed the distance to the white rabbit, causing her body to freeze in terror. He was close to her crotch, yet the strength of her thigh muscle prevented him from getting deeper. His goons tried to help him spread her legs, but she was putting out a stagnant struggle. "Come on, freak. You were going to give me your V card anyway. I felt the heat you were bringing." He once looked like a valiant rogue that was misplaced in this hellhole known as the Triangle. Now she knew that he was no better. She saw him reach the buckle on his pants as she was losing the strength to hold back his advances. In her fatigued body, she thought back to her life back in Atlanta, seeing the faces of her parents. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm sorry," was what the white rabbit thought at this moment. Even through all the scrutiny from outsiders, she knew that her parents loved her. She hated those elves back in her homeland. They never accepted her as an equal. She buried herself in the scriptures of Earth every day from when she was a kitten. She was looked down upon for inheriting her father's affinity for Earth, being the parent with no knowledge of magecraft. Her mother was the true mage of the pairing, coming from a long lineage of centalopes with the affinity for fire. She became a pariah when she bore children to a human, a low-born smith, no less. She didn't let outside opinion lower herself, becoming a prominent teacher at the Atlanta School of Magecraft. She worked tirelessly to gain her title, having 2 older children inherit the affinity of flame. Yet, she was the odd one out, the misfit of her blood. She couldn't teach the white rabbit anything when it came to spells, so she was left out of lessons. It wasn't out of malice. She did try to find a tutor for her, but the fact that she was a mudblood deterred any able bodies. Even if the world saw her as a curse to her mother's blood, she became a knowledgeable scholar. But the world is cruel. She didn't have any friends growing up. She was starved from the natural drive of a centalope to belong. Once, her upperclassmen came with an offer to join their sorority. She hopped in glee at the chance of belonging. The pretentious elves had no plans to let a half-born into their coven, and the pranks of elven touch can be rather severe. She was tasked with sneaking into the archives and obtaining a priceless mana crystal that was already shattered by the time she went for it. The heads of the sorority had already told their professors that she was the one to break the priceless item, condemning her to fate. No matter how much she told those elven elders that she was innocent, none believed the word of a half-born. Elven debt is a life sentence for one with a shorter lifespan, living triple the ones of other races. The news reached her parents the next day, debt decades worth of their own household salary. She felt that she strained her parents' lives, her father working triple his workload, and her mother taking dangerous side jobs as an adventure. They never had time to see one another, and when they did it was only glances. They used to be glued together, lounging, cooking, laughing, but that was only a distant memory. They lashed out at one another, slept in different rooms, and came home at different times. She hid in her room like a hermit, weeping every night, knowing she had ruined her family's life. Even her older brother and sister called her a burden, yet they tried to apologize after what they said. The tension she brought was suffocating her precious family. The damage was already done. She was a burden. She was killing her family with her presence alone. What shattered her heart was when she took a glimpse at the front door, hiding by the creak of the staircase. A high-end professor of the institution was fondling her mother, laughing and degrading her in every way. Her father stood a couple of feet away, balling his fist in anger, yet didn't act. The professor rubbed his hand on her mother's waist as she shook in place with overwhelming rage. The professor kissed her cheek and walked away without any retaliation. Her mother slammed the door and had a mental breakdown, sobbing while she collapsed to the floor. Her father rushed to her side and buried her deep into his arms, cradling her like she was a babe. The white rabbit had had enough of being a parasite to her family's happiness, storming towards the university the next day. She went into the board of directors, demanding that she carry the debt she supposedly created. They laughed at her, taunting how a useless half-born planned on making all that coin. She only had one option, the option that many of the mainlanders would never take. She told them that she would become an adventurer on the Middle Islands, the Triangle. Her words made the elders smile like demons, acting like they always planned for her fate. The Triangle is where all of the high-end materials are birthed, making families nobles with successful expeditions. The only problem was the high death rate, a lawless land filled with monsters, slavers, and sentient cannibals. They seemed to be overjoyed at the thought of her untimely death, accepting her terms for 40 years. She felt terrible about stealing some coins and products from her father, but what's an extra amount of thievery going to settle? Before she left, her father was passed out on the floor, running a high fever from overexertion. She wanted to tell her father goodbye and kiss him on the cheek, even helping to lower his fever with wet towels. She wanted to tell him how much she loved him, yet couldn't risk waking him and demanding that she didn't do what she was planning. She knew that they didn't have the coin to come after her. Her mother's absence of an adventure would give her time. Her mother was a rational woman. Maybe she would accept her death after her week of adventuring. In the white rabbit's heart, she didn't go to the Triangle in search of glory. She went to die. Yet she didn't want to die. She didn't want to be defiled, to be eaten. She thought she might have been able to make it after meeting Riggs, that her debt could be settled within the years. She could go back and see her family's faces. She also thought that maybe she could find a life out here, just like her mother did. Yet she was going to be another statistic, another reason why those on the mainland should avoid the Triangle. She closed her eyes as she heard the laughing, taunting of those who wished her harm. She accepted her fate and wished that the Lady of Chaos would consume her quickly. The funny part is that both deities are neutral. They like a story to be interesting. Damn beta males. I can smell that kumfunk a mile away. The group paused from the tomboyish voice that echoed behind the Balturus goon as the hulking man shadowed her. Suddenly, a head popped over from his side, revealing a Lyconian female. She had a scar on her cheek, but it didn't affect her youthful and pleasant features. The color of ravens, her ears and hair shone black. Her hungry eyes glowed topaz in the faint sun. She looked over to the Balturus extra limb and smiled deviously. "You got a nice cock, Bullman," the Lyconian said while she flicked her ears, having the large man confused. Flattery wasn't the only thing she had for the man, as she flicked her blunt claws and dug them deep into his bud. The Balturus male roared in pain, swiping at her only for the Lyconian to swiftly dodge with a wag of her tail. The pain was too great as the bull rushed through his conspirators. Riggs and the men dropped the white rabbit, knowing to get out of the way of a raging bull. Once she felt the air of her during her freefall, the white rabbit fell on her back with an unpleasant squish from her coat. The Lyconian voiced her disgust. "You." That sounded worse than it smelled, as she felt the threat of an attacker. "Shut up, you bitch," one of the men said while he slashes his blade at her gut. In the split second, the Lyconian smiled from adrenaline and nimbly swirled her body around him, grappling him with her natural strength. Once the fiend was in her grasp, she dug her fangs deep into his fleshy neck, causing the man to wail from the pain. She savored his flavor. He was fed well. Blood flowing down his shoulder in alarming amounts, while the Lyconian pulled on her teeth to rip a bit of flesh, swallowing it down her throat. The white rabbit watched in horror, while the goons and pedestrians focused their attention on the gore. Riggs went to calm his enforcer as he was on his knees outside the alleyway. "That bitch put craters in my cock," as he dry heaves in pain, dropping a tear from his damaged manhood. The remaining three watched in horror as their friend's body went limp and his voice was silenced. The Lyconian lets his body drop while she swings her red shorts with her tail wagging. She turned towards the goons while she tensed her muscles, visible under her light leather armor and red-stained crop top. Her lack of protection only made her seem more fierce, for she was lean yet more built than anybody she had ever seen. "You killed Hicks, you rabid hound," the Panrius goon announced at the Lyconian as she licked her fingers. Her sweet moans of satisfaction disturbed the goons, but with resolve, they all charged at her. The white rabbit acted out of instinct, reaching into her back strap quickly to only be met with slime. She gritted her teeth, trying her damnedest to ignore the awful warmth from the bull seed. She found her pouch of seeds and pulled them out quickly, pulling the ribbon off and conjuring the words of power. "Eradicibus fiamis, ad solum compactum, scopum meum velat, arborum liga." With her words of power, she summoned vines from the small bag of cloth, forcibly wrapping the goons tightly to the alley walls. They screamed from the sudden supernatural force as the vines bound them to the walls. "Let us go, you freak," the Panrius male shouted at the white rabbit, struggling within the vine's constraint. His expression turned into horror once he saw the Lyconian slowly walk over to him. The hairs from the back of the white rabbit's neck stood up as the Lyconian passed with a proud stride. She was everything she feared from the triangle, a hunter with jaws dripping blood of the sentient. She didn't react towards the white rabbit, only walking up to the Panrius male with hungry eyes. He desperately screamed for help, pleading for the attention of more pedestrians. The building crowds of different races watched the gore show, with the herbivorous ones speaking over. "Everyone run, it's a devourer." The ones that didn't have the stomach for gore fled, while the ones with a taste for flesh stood and watched intently. The screams of the cowards gradually fell silent, while the Lyconian pulled on the Panrius goat horns, chomping on his neck. It looked like a passionate kiss on his neck, until the Panrius male started to convulse in pain, and a stream of blood flowed down. She thrashed her fangs, tearing chunks out of her victim. She used his horns and pulled back on them to rip out his throat, showing the white rabbit his anatomy. She watched silently as the Lyconian hopped from man to man, echoing the gut-wrenching screams of those who were her prey. The Lyconian only wags her tail, enjoying every bit of flesh she devoured until the group turned limp. After she was done killing everyone, she turned her yellow gaze at the white rabbit. Her smile triggered her fight instincts as she summoned other words of power. Eratacibus fiamis, ad solium compactum, scopum meum velat, arborum liga. She didn't hesitate for a second, calling upon one of her seeds to launch an attack on the Lyconian with blunt vines. She launched the wolf at the hulking Baltarus, hitting Riggs as well. The Baltarus didn't flinch, only turning around at the Lyconian with fury. The hulking mass of male gave a hearty grunt as he stood over the Lyconian, shadowing her from the morning sun. Being a pissed-off bull was an understatement. His forehead vein was popping out, seeming like it would burst any moment. The crowd was getting rowdy, sensing that a brawl was going to happen in mere moments. The crowd roared, saying things like "slice his belly" and "looks like meat's on the table tonight." The white rabbit was surrounded by nothing but savages and the rotten smell of spilled blood. The Lyconian got back on her feet, standing tall against the Baltarus male without a hint of fear. Even if she was a savage beast, the white rabbit saw elegance in her stand against the impossible. "You're finished, dog. I'll make sure to reorganize your guts when I use you as a flesh toy," the Minotaur roared while flexing his absurd muscles. Riggs was in the background of the crowd, seeing that the situation was a bit too much for him, fleeing swiftly. The Lyconian snarled and crouched her stance, tensing her strong calves and curling her claws. She held her weight on the ground, rooting herself like a great oak tree. She looked at the man with a fiendish smile, caked in the blood of his comrades. The only way that nasty cock is ever getting into my guts is through my stomach," the black wolf said as she lunged at the Minotaur's legs, slashing at his calves. Her charge was powerful, causing the man to stagger his feet and almost lose his balance. The bull wasn't going to let her have all the fun, gaining his balance and stomping his foot, barely missing the black wolf. After contact with the ground, his weighty attack made a small puff of dirt block the white rabbit's vision. All the rabbit saw was the silhouettes of the two, with the wolf managing to climb the bull's shoulders. His screams echoed through the mayhem, with the audible sound of flesh tearing. The crowd roared in glee, watching as the two sentient beings battled to the death. Everyone seemed to be distracted, and the opposite end of the alley looked clear from the majority of people. The white rabbit didn't want to be there when a victor was named, gathering her things and strength. She launched into a sprint, running away from all this sinful barbarism. She slipped and staggered from the mix of blood and liquid sprawled all over the alley. With every slip she continued to feel, seeming like a prey running from its predator. She turned at the clearing, only to bump into a woman, both losing their footing. "Hey, what's your damage?" the small figure said, but the white rabbit had one thing in mind. She didn't turn to say sorry or to acknowledge the woman. She continued her dash. A couple of people were in her way as she bobbed and weaved her way through the crowd. Her heart felt like it was going to give out, and she didn't know where she would go. Her fantasy of riches and adventure was gone. She was only the helpless girl who couldn't do anything for anyone. She still wanted to survive, but just seeing any carnivorous people caused her to feel deep anxiety. She was trapped, and there was nowhere to go. Only running did she feel safe. The white rabbit wanted her parents to save her from some miraculous sort of event, wishing her whole time in the triangle was just a sick dream. She was losing herself, feeling her pace slow, but her sanity breaking. Her back twitched, feeling the tip-taps of a pursuer hunting her down. They were fast, even faster than the pace she could muster. She tried with all her strength to at least match the footsteps, but her calves felt like they were on fire. "Hey, Missy, stop." A familiar voice rang behind her, sounding like the body she collided with moments ago. She ignored her command, continuing the chase where she was the prey. The stranger was getting closer and closer, already a few feet away from her. "If I stop, I'm going to die," she thought. Her stamina wasn't enough to give her a boost. White Rabbit felt the Reaper's touch on her back, causing her body to go limp. The hand grabbed onto her back, pulling her down, causing her to lose balance and fall. The entity pulled her to the side of an alley, wrapping their arms around her body tightly. All she could hear was a squishy sound as they both crashed down. "Oh God, please, don't be what I think that is," the entity said in disgust. All the White Rabbit's emotions welled up as she began to wail like a child. The entity wrapped her hand around her mouth, silencing her from primal fear. She thrashed weakly, not having the strength to put up a fight anymore. She waited for the beast to dig its fangs into her skin, like the bloodbath a few blocks away. "Hey, calm yourself, Missy. I'm not going to hurt you," the captor said with a sweet and feminine voice, reminding the white rabbit of her elder sister. Before all the events, she was a loving sister, being a supportive and playfully brash woman. Her curiosity got the better of her, because the being didn't dig her fangs into her skin yet. The woman loosened her grip as the white rabbit relaxed from her freak out, letting her face be visible. The woman flicked her brown rabbit ears and looked at her with a calm yet jaded expression. The white rabbit found it a little humorous that her captor was a cute centalope female, focusing on the stains that she gained from the grapple. White rabbit's volatile cries slowly diminished like rain on a fire, feeling no malice from the women. She held her skepticism. Pretty faces almost got her defiled by Boltaurus. The brown rabbit noticed her nervous sweat, releasing her grip on her. The white rabbit rose up in a swift hop, but knew that she didn't stand a chance of fleeing from the brown rabbit. She seemed to be a full-blooded centalope, being a couple of inches shorter and having a pelt lacking in patches. She saw what came of the brown rabbit's leather armor, seeing slime flow down with thick viscosity. She felt a little bad for the stranger. "Man, can't I just be clean for once in this goddamn hellhole? And why does it have to reek of bovine?" the brown rabbit said while she observed her soiled tunic, instinctively wiping it off with her hands. The brain didn't connect to the action, as she realized late what she had done. Now she had the liquid that shall not be named on her palms, which made the women gag. The white rabbit remained silent for the most part, tempering her glazed eyes after her wail. The brown rabbit locked eyes with hers, stomped upwards to roughly be on each other's level. She was a short one, confirming to the white rabbit that she indeed was a full-blooded centalope. Riggs was a full-blooded centalope, she thought, remaining silent, slowly reaching for her bag of seeds. "Hold on there. I really don't want to be launched by any tree or whatever thing you have in that bag." The brown rabbit waved her arms, submitting to mercy, drooping her ears with unease. White rabbit flicked her ears in curiosity, noticing that the observing centalope knew what she did a couple of blocks away. "So you were there," White Rabbit concluded, taking a hold of her bag, reading an attack. The brown rabbit had a nervous sweat, seeming that she thought hard on her words. "I only saw a bit. What those men did to you was disgusting. It was getting rather bloody. So I wanted to know if you were okay." Brown Rabbit sincerely answered, straightening her back and tilting her head. No matter how she looked, it wasn't a reason to tackle her to the side of a shack. "If you were so worried about me, then why did you tackle me?" White Rabbit aggressively pointed out, for acts of violence the stranger had committed. Brown Rabbit pondered even more, rubbing her chin out of instinct, then flicking her hands as she felt the sticky fingers. You seem alone. Even if you do have a bag of tricks, some people will only see a lonely rabbit. Brown Rabbit pointed out at the town streets. The half-born followed her gaze. The streets kept on moving, but those who lingered were watching the both of them. They looked hungry, greedy, and opportunistic as they eyed the both of them. That is when the White Rabbit noticed that those who were stalking them were eyeing both of them. No matter who you are, Missy, lonely rabbits get hunted around here. Being two makes them think, but it's only a matter of time before a bastard pounces. Brown Rabbit said sternly, as she too had a strain of nervous sweat flow down her chin. White Rabbit knew that they were in the same boat, but that's what she thought when she partied with Riggs. So what? We should party up. I remember Riggs telling me the same thing, and look where I am now. White Rabbit pointed out, being cautious of strangers' trust. Brown Rabbit rubbed her neck quickly, clicking her lips when she felt the cold slime. Even if she did have a point, her situation was dire. You're going to die out here defiled, sold, then defiled again, if you don't have a group to back you up. The Brown Rabbit swirled her finger, forming her sentence as she spoke. Her words turned the White Rabbit's gut, knowing that what she said was true. Conflict fills the brain. Her heart refuses to trust anyone. The Brown Rabbit grabbed onto the White Rabbit's shoulders, tilting her neck to look her straight in the eyes. I promise you that I won't try to do anything like that to you. I prefer males and earning coins with good old-fashioned adventuring. The Brown Rabbit said, while she gently shook the tall rabbit's shoulders. White Rabbit felt her sincerity behind her words, but was confused by the last part. Of course you like males. You're a female after all. The White Rabbit said as she tilted her head with a finger on her chin. Brown Rabbit looked at her with a blank stare, blinking rapidly, dumbfounded by her innocence. Brown Rabbit shook her head and grabbed onto her arm, locking it with hers, guiding her to the opposite of the alley. Wow, you definitely need someone watching your back. You're too innocent and ignorant. The Brown Rabbit started to pick up speed, pacing them both. White Rabbit didn't care much for her observation in her thinking, but she did have a point. Once they came to the other side, it felt like time stopped for the White Rabbit. The back of her hair twitched, and the smell of heavy blood wafted from the air, circulating through the opening. A figure turned towards them with a familiar tall wag. White Rabbit stopped, feeling the urge to run the other direction. The same raven-haired Lyconian that haunted her vision in that alley came. Her face and hands were stained in crimson, dripping with the excess viscera of countless bodies. The same smile she had as she butchered men like a savage beast. White Rabbit wanted to flee. She remembered her spell only made her grunt. She believed that the Lyconian returned for her revenge. She wanted to turn the other direction, but the Brown Rabbit held her firmly. Damn it, Chili. What did Moore tell you about stacking bodies around towns? The Brown Rabbit scolded the Lyconian, causing her once psychotic grin to become pouted. White Rabbit didn't know how to react. The once beastly Lyconian was now sulking like a child. She was more surprised by how familiar the two of them were. "You two know each other." The White Rabbit pointed at the Lyconian with a wobbling finger. The Brown Rabbit chuckled while she released her grip and walked up towards the Lyconian named Chili. She wrapped her arms around the Lyconian and gave her a deep hug. The wolf only blushed while she wagged her tail with the same pouted face. "Do I know this lady?" "Yes, I know this lady. She is my best pal." The Brown Rabbit rubbed herself against the Lyconian, causing the threatening woman to grunt with embarrassment. The Lyconian smiled briefly, only to realize what was all over her body. She gave the Brown Rabbit a sniff, choking from the smell. "Gross, Lynn, you have that bull's spank all over you," Chili said, while the Brown Rabbit locked her hug with a sharp grin. Chili tries to push off the soiled Centalope, only for Lynn to insist on more interaction. It would seem that Lynn had an ulterior motive, rubbing all the slime off of her. "And you smell like a butchery," Lynn said with a fake smile directed at her friend, causing Chili to shake in fear. The White Rabbit wonders how they could be in this weird relationship. It messes with the natural order of both predator and prey. It seemed to have no importance when Lynn turned towards her while locking her arm around Chili. "It doesn't matter now. I'm happy that you're here." Tulls smelled action not too far from us. Lynn nodded her head behind the White Rabbit, gaining the attention of both of them. Two figures noticed that they were spotted, fleeing back to the crowd. It was a Sithkatul and a Calistocan, both being carnivores, having a taste for little rabbit meat. White Rabbit felt unnerved by the fact that they were being hunted. Even if the thought of blindly trusting another sentient irks her, especially when having a feral Lyconian in the corner. The truth remains that she was safer in their corner than traveling the streets alone. "Sorry for a terrible first impression, Half-Rabbit, but right now you're prey, especially since your other half is human," Chili said with a sharp tongue, getting elbowed by Lynn to mild discomfort. Her words stung the White Rabbit's heart as she turned to the bloodied Lyconian. "How do you know that I'm mixed?" The White Rabbit questions with her ears drooped. She heard of taller centalopes known as jackalopes, a subspecies of her race. Every eared race had one. Why was Chili sure about her mixed heritage? "Do they not have carnivores where you came from, Halfie?" Chili said, not knowing that she had said an offensive slur to the White Rabbit. She twitched her ears in frustration, biting down on her tongue. Mouthing off a woman with blood on her mouth wasn't wise. "I'm from an elven colony. The only ones that eat flesh are humans, dwarves, and vulpises. Only cattle, though." White Rabbit left out her homeland's location. Can't be too trusting. The Lyconian chuckled as she walked towards her, having the White Rabbit put up her guard. Chili didn't flinch, leaning into the White Rabbit's face and booped her nose. "A majority of beastkin that have a hunger for meat can smell your pheromones. You sweat more than your average centalope," Chili whispered, smiling as the white rabbit reacted negatively to her observation. The white rabbit was taught that sweating made you smell awful, so she gave herself a sniff. The Lyconian laughed and walked back to Lynn's side. Humans and dwarfs are the only sentient races that can handle high temperatures, having more sweat glands than us pure-blooded beast folk. They also sweat more under stress, having more lingering scents. Lynn added, while the Lyconian nodded her head. The white rabbit heard enough to convince her that many of the Triangle's residents were going to know what she was. "So I'll never be safe in the Triangle." The white rabbit came to the conclusion, feeling even more like a freak than she did before. She wondered why she was the odd one out. Why was being half human far more important than being half centalope? Lynn saw the strain in her visage, waving her hand to gain the half-born's attention. Humans are the only ones to ever install full functional colonies and kingdoms on the Triangle. They are smart and inventive, yet cruel and resilient to change. Lynn added, explaining why there was some hatred towards humans. It was true that humans had had extreme fortune when it comes to settling within the Triangle. They were the only ones to have 7 kingdoms rise on its grounds. Beastkin fear humans, therefore they hate them as well. White Rabbit verbally thought out loud, now knowing how dire her situation is. She had to trust strangers and gamble with her life. It's a better alternative than being consumed. She looks at the two of them, knowing full well that they didn't seem to be an adequate option. They were her only option, though, wiping the bits of tears left and blushes with a pout. Mind if I tag along with you too, please?" White Rabbit pleaded at the two strange women, bowing her head in honorifics. The two looked at one another, silently contemplating whether they should bring her in. "Welcome to the crew," Lynn said gently, causing Chili to snarl at the Centalope taking the lead. Lynn didn't flinch, which surprised the White Rabbit. A bloody Lyconian acting upon her primordial instinct makes her skin crawl. "I'm the one to make the decision." Chili pouted like a toddler, crossing her arms and turning her back to the Centalope. Lynn arched her back and patted the sulking Lyconian's head, which made the woman blush. An odd pairing indeed, but the White Rabbit found it rather endearing. She gave out a huge sigh of relief, feeling rather comfortable with the two women on her side. It was a nice change of pace from all that had happened in a single morning. After breathing from relief, the three women stood in place awkwardly, uttering not a word. "We stink. All of us could use some needed TLC." Lynn spoke the forbidden words, having the other two women blush from embarrassment. They were all worse for wear, being caked in blood, snot, and bull sperm really made the flies comfortable. Some pedestrians showed their disdain for their reek, waving their hands and pinching their noses. "Before we head back to camp, we should head to Mama Cookie's place," Chili said, while she wagged her tail with her amber eyes glistening in anticipation. Lynn sighed at her suggestion, putting her wrist on her waist to show her reluctance. Chali, that place is a pseudo-brothel. We shouldn't be bringing a half-born over there. Lynn interjected, waving her hand to dismiss the idea. The White Rabbit had enough of men for today, rather being stinky than ogled. We stick with Haffy through it all, say no to anyone asking if we need money, and we're golden. Chali really wanted to go over to Mama Cookie's place. That is what both of the Centalopes could tell. The White Rabbit was getting tired of hearing Haffy when the Lyconian was addressing her. Juno. The two women flicked their ears from the White Rabbit's interjection, turning to her with all their attention. Chali rubbed her neck, noticing that Juno wasn't a fan of being called a name. Lynn rubbed her chin, thinking that her name was fitting, flicking away the stickiness. "All right, Juno, follow our lead," Lynn said while she waved her hand for Juno to come over to them. Juno flicked her ears gleefully, choosing to trust the two, gambling her trust. If she followed their word, she would finally have some friendly bodies. The thought of a bath seemed like a luxury that she shouldn't pass over, skipping by their side. Hopefully, the story of the mage, Juno, can finally start with a highlight. Scene. Hell no. Juno screamed at the top of her lungs, causing the bystanders to watch. The women walked 30 minutes northeast from Tuskgate. They traveled uphill, where the forest still reigned its territory. They were just steps away from the bathhouse, built like a large manor with walls and guards posted. A lot of security for a simple, otherworlder-inspired establishment. But Lynn did say that it acted as a brothel. It didn't take a lot of speculation on how the place gets coins. Intimacy seems to be bought with gold around here. Many vendors seem to set up shops within its gates, filled with questionable merchandise. Chali focuses her gaze on the many stalls with revealing underwear, wondering what's the need of having a hole where the entry was. Couldn't someone just slide the fabric to the side? She questions honestly, shaking her head in disapproval. She wanted Lynn to agree with her, only to see her gaze focus elsewhere. Lynn was eyeing a stall with all sorts of aphrodisiacs, from simple chocolates to powders made with orc testicles. She blinked continuously. She had questions for later. "I'm not selling you my underwear, you dirt little troll." Juno screams at an elderly Rhea who owned the stall, which was nothing but an old wagon. The Rhea pulled on his ear hairs, long enough to make wide strokes, ignoring all her screaming. The other two stopped ignoring this scene, adding their 2 senses. "I know that we all should keep a sliver of pride within us, but you can't beat free from the only actual stall selling normal clothes." Lynn tries to reason, which makes Juno blush like a tomato. She thought that Lynn would be on her side, being the only reasonable resident of the triangle she had met so far. Looks like she was too reasonable, focusing on the value of coins more than an old man seeing boobas. "Yeah, just sell the old rat your goods. Maybe he'll end up paying us," Chali suggested after, fueling Juno's fury as she realized she was in an uphill battle with savages. She gripped her trousers, twitching her ears as she tempered herself. Then an idea popped into her mind, information that would deter the Rhea from his barter. "Sorry, I can't sell you my undies. My whole outfit is soiled with mail. Surely you wouldn't want any of that. That rabbit girl sounds freaky. So the rumors are true that they go for larger prey." One of the Tuskgate bystanders whispered into her mate's ear. Juno's ears flicked at her declaration, having no words for a stranger who didn't know the whole story. Chili chuckled at the couple's conclusion, stopping when Lynn gave her a threatening smile. "Oh, that will be fine, madam. Anything from you will give my life meaning again. You are the personification of Venus." The old Rhea shouted out, waving his hands around like he was summoning gods. The color drained from Juno's face, forgetting for a bit that she was in the company of savages. "I like these rats." Chili chuckled, entertained by the show from the obviously ill man. Juno was expecting Lynn to scold her again, only to hear her sweet squeaks of laughter. Juno grumbled, feeling defeated by having nobody aiding her argument. "You two don't resemble anything from my goddess Venus, but I will gladly exchange some clothes if you two trade in your warm and worn set." The Rhea elder licks his lips lustfully, rubbing his hands together like he was invited to an all-you-can-eat feast. "Deal," the two said in unison, sharing the same mind as they thought about the coin they were saving. Juno twitched her left eye, wondering how they could be so blasé about stripping next to a tiny fossil. "Hey, Pops, do you need measurements?" Chili lowered her back, lowering to the Rhea's eye level, supporting her body with her wrist on her hips. The elder Rhea shook his head, laughing as if her question was foolish. "I'm a professional, dearie. I already know every nook and cranny of all of you once I laid eyes on you." Elder Rhea said with a sparkle in his eye, saying it suavely, but his hideous visage gave him negative points. The two nodded silently at the Rhea, fueling his lustful grin. "Looks like we have no other choice," Lynn announced as the Misfits began to disrobe, catching the attention of males of all species. Juno screamed with a flushed face, never expecting them to be actual exhibitionists. She covered her eyes like a delicate maiden that she knew she was. She locks eyes with Lynn, who only smiles like a gremlin while she unbuttons her shirt. "One of us, Juno," Lynn said in a sweet yet sinister voice, showing Juno how predatory this petite little centalope can be. She walks up to her, inaudibly pressuring her while she slowly slides her tunic off. The howls and whistles of the bystanders flooded her mind, while Chili slid off her trousers as well. The Rhea laughed with excitement, drooling and foaming at the mouth with the display. Juno closes her eyes, hoping that all of this will just go away. It didn't, though, while she began to form a tear in her left eye, knowing that she wasn't getting out of this. Her frustration reached its maximum state, clenching her fist as she let her emotions boil over. Ah, she cried out to gods that she hoped were listening, but the gods loved this type of display. She began with her coat first, letting it fall on the floor with a splat. The elder Ree was now barking like a feral hound, chained by his old body. Juno unbuttons her tunic, letting only a single tear fall as she prepares for another. Scene. The Rhea arches his back while he shoves his nose in a familiar purple robe, contorting himself as if he were almost 100 years younger. He takes a chilling, deep breath, getting plugged up by the extra slime. The old Rhea didn't seem to mind that the robe was caked in the aroma of bull, coming back out like he smelled the most fragrant of flowers. Thank you, lords of the unknown. Long have I been thirsty, and water didn't quench, starved, yet grain never filled. The elder Rhea raised his arms into the sky, holding Juno's purple robe and the other pieces of his shoulder like a trophy. It seemed to have been washed, yet had the smell of a male and patches from what seemed to be tears from claws. His face was caked in crusty white dandruff, having Juno choke up with phantom vomit. She stared at the man from a distance, her ruby eyes filled with bloodlust that she had never felt before. She had a purple robe similar to her previous one, the only piece of fabric that wasn't revealing her private areas to the world. She had replacement trousers, undergarments, and a tunic over her shoulder, but she pulled on her robe to hide the rest. The Rhea quickly picks up his bounty of valuable fabrics, frantically grabbing onto all of them like his life depended on it. He bolted into his wagon's entrance. First, he threw the pill in and dived into the back. He scrambled around like a roach, shaking the wagon from all his movement. After he got back on his feet, he peeked out from the wagon and grabbed the 2 swinging doors with each hand. Sorry, everyone. Shops closed for the day. If you hear a commotion in my wagon, I assure you that I'm hard at work, he announced without a hint of shame, slamming the doors once his speech was over. In his solitude, the Rhea sounded like a screaming hog as his wagon swayed around from the activity. Does anyone have a box of matches and a holy book? Juno turned around to the 2 women standing at the bathhouse's entrance. Her mind wasn't computing, as the otherworlders say, losing all rationality. They were in the same boat, with Lynn wearing her new clothes and Chili standing proud, with her pelt showing. Just got my stuff too. Don't have those items in stock, stranger, Lynn jokingly said while she covered her rabbit teeth. She then walks to Juno and grabs her arm, guiding her into the establishment. Come on, killer. The baths call our names. Lynn skips while she hums, excited by the prospects of a good cleansing. Chili leads the party in, having every male look her way as she struts. An infernal couple takes notice, being tamier versions of wolves and resembling more like hounds. The male's sharp ears stood up as he blushed, trying to avoid her as his mate stared at him with daggers. Hey there, stud. Chili winked at the raven-haired infernal seductively, having him wag his tail rapidly and pant. His blonde mate drooped her ears, and her tail stood up without movement. When they were a good distance away, the female snarled at her male, slapping him across the face. "You bastard, I knew you were into Lyconians." The female tensed her body and walked away with a furious stride. The male told her to wait as he followed behind her. She didn't stop her stride as they exited the gate with the condolences of the afternoon guards. Chili laughed at the sight, seeming to find joy riling up other females. "Never took you for a Lyconian to like infernals," Lynn questions Chili, while Juno looks at her inviting gossip. They all weaved through the traffic like a snake guiding itself through foliage. They were in their own little world, ignoring all the flustered males. No matter how tone an infernal male gets, they are still weaker to a full-blooded Lyconian. I require a male that can really put me in my place, only able to breed me when he has proven himself stronger," Chili said while she intertwined her fingers together, dreaming of the most suitable mate she could think of. Juno thought that her vision of an ideal mate was unsurprising from her brutality earlier, but she knew that different cultures applied to the Lyconians. "Please, you were never that orthodox when it came to being a Lyconian. I know you dream of large good boys that you can snuggle with." Lynn checks her, only for the Lyconian to snarl out of embarrassment. Juno found it rather cute, being more of a romantic than she would have assumed. They finally reached the front desk, where two women were tending to visitors. They were both Sithkatals, one refined with elegance from her many years, and the younger one being a spitting image of her elder. They both flicked their cat ears, with the mother shaking her head in her palm and the daughter blushing. "Didn't more show you any civility, pup?" The elder talks down to Chili, ashamed of what she saw in her lobby. Chili's tail wags at the sight of her as she opens her arms and rushes over to the Sithkatal for an embrace. "Nice to see you again, Aunt Cookie." She squeezes the elder with a tight grip, having Auntie Cookie hissing with reluctance. She didn't claw at the Lyconian, which in the cat world means that she was slightly liked by the owner. "Get off me, you dirty pup. You're all covered with blood, and God knows what that awful odor is." Aunt Cookie pushes the happy Lyconian away from her, seeing some of her filth carried over. Her daughter only pinches her nose, avoiding any interaction with the exhibitionist. Chili notices, swiveling her head at the younger Sithiktal. "Nice to see you too, Buttermilk," Chili said swiftly, with less enthusiasm than her mother. Buttermilk flicked her ears, choosing not to greet the Lyconian. Chili giggled at the straight noodle persona, winking at her, which pissed the Catwoman off. "Just put on some clothes." Buttermilk tenses her body, while her tail frantically swayed side to side. She then notices Lynn with a tall rabbit-eared lady following like a lost lamb. "At least you still have some decency, Lynn. Who is the new girl?" Buttermilk asked the small Centalope, swaying her tail gingerly. Lynn said as she presented Juno, who bowed. "This one got stripped by the little market outside. Juno here had a really bad day. We could really use some acidic water, to burn skin off. Lynn half-heartedly joked, for she really wanted her skin to be purged of the stench. Buttermilk nodded, getting a whiff from them as well. She was surprised that they smelled worse than Chili, as the Lyconian was caked in blood. "You smell like the aftermath from one of our rooms," Aunt Cookie said while she lit up her pipe with a match. She waved the match quickly to kill it, putting the stick on an ashtray near the desk. While she takes a heavy hit from the pipe, she checks Juno out from up and down. Juno blushes nervously from the woman's silted blue eyes, looking at all the curves she revealed under her coat. "Say, Juno, was it? Would you be interested in making some gold?" She blew out from her elegant lips as some wafted away with the smell of rose petals. Juno flicked her ears, curious about how she could make gold under her. Then she remembered that she was in a bathhouse brothel, just like Lynn warned her before. "No, madam, I appreciate the offer, but I must decline." Juno gave out a gentle lie, for it was far better than a hell no. Aunt Cookie was amused by her answer, smiling while she took another hit. After she breathes out the aromatic smoke from her smooth lips, she looks at Lynn while she taps away the char from her pipe. 10 silvers each," she said, as if it was a normal transaction, while Juno's heart almost gave out. 10 silvers was a lot of money for a bathhouse. In Atlanta, a trip would only cost a few coppers. Lynn swirled her coin pouch out, pulling exactly 30 silver coins like it was nothing to her. Juno grabbed the woman's arm, which had Lynn a bit confused. "That's a lot of money you are putting down. You could buy a stay at a high-end inn back where I lived," Juno said, failing to understand why Lynn was slapping down that money for a stranger. Aunt Cookie chuckled at the shocked half-born, realizing that she was a true foreigner of the triangle. "You're paying for an experience, dear. Not many places around here have hot water, guards, and a room for yourself." Cookie swirled her pipe with pride, which confused Juno, who was ignorant about the economy of the triangle. Buttermilk waved her hand, gaining the attention of the half-born. "Each room is solitary and guarded, and you are free to do whatever you want with it, as long as you don't destroy the room or devour a sentient. Which doesn't concern you, I hope." Buttermilk used her fingers to count the benefits of their business, slowly making Juno understand. After what happened in the morning, this place sounded like a paradise. What she's saying is you could bathe, sleep, and fuck when you rent out a room. You could even be experimental with other races. Chili coarsely added, over flooding the innocent half-born with lewd ideas. She thought of a tiny centalope like Lynn being in the same room as a Calistocan, imagining how scandalous that would be. They also have trusted masseurs free with purchase. Considering that we are all going to share the same room, our time is increased to an hour and a half. Lynn said with a shine in her pupils, loving to explain trivia to the new blood. Masseurs does seem adequate for the price, almost like money would be wasted if they didn't. She then lets the Centalope's arm go, tapping her fingers like a child, silently begging for sweets. Lynn drops a handful of silver into Buttermilk's hands, confirming services. The cat lady shifted the coins, nodding at the amount given. Buttermilk reaches down the counter and pulls out 4 wooden tablets, half of them blue and pink, with claw marks or without. Okay, ladies, would you prefer males or females? Carnivore present or not? Buttermilk asked her questions in her saleswoman's voice, bubbly and sweet. Juno applauded her switch in temperament. The question confused Juno. Why would those words be related to the bath? It clicked, as this was about sexual preferences. If it was, why were the options severely loose? She means masseurs miss dirty thoughts. We prefer females, and mixed is fine. Lynn elbows Juno softly while she answers Buttermilk's question. The attendant puts away every tablet but the pink one with claw marks. She then walked around the counter and waved at the girls in the direction of the door. This way, ladies. Buttermilk opens the doors to reveal a large garden that acted like the commons for the large piece of land. Surrounding the commons were huts steaming from the hot water that flowed within their walls. An aqueduct that seems to be funneling from a nearby river, filling up a large sentient-made pond that was supported by a beam to leave an entrance. Large men were transporting wood from a covered stockpile, bringing the lumber under the pond, while a RIA worker made a fire to warm up the pond. He didn't use a large amount of wood for the fire. He only fueled the fire so that the large pool of water stayed warm. It was a beautiful sight, filled with vibrant flowers, and a lodging area being used by bystanders. Guards were sprawled around the commons and posted right by the hut's privacy covers. Both male and female workers carried baskets filled with towels, soap, and aromatics for the water, walking around looking for rooms. Juno didn't have any words to say, only scanning the area with a smile on her face. The 4 ladies walked on the stone pathway that led to all of the huts, trying to find an unoccupied room. The area was booming with conversations, tranquil enough not to be oversaturated. The group turned all background chatter into noise until they passed a hut with sweet moans seeping through the curtains. It was both male and female moaning, echoing out while the guard at the entrance tried to ignore it. Juno drooped her ears in an attempt to drown out the noise. They were obviously mating in there. Chalise smiled at the bashful half-born, nudging her with a couple stabs of her elbow. Buttermilk continues to lead the group down the path, unfazed by the debaucherous activity. She should be used to it by this point, Juno thought, as they reached a stop. Buttermilk found a unit that was unoccupied, looking at the small shelves that had a variety of hourglasses lined up in a row. All of the glass sand stayed stagnant on the bottom, and no guards posted themselves by the door. All right, this unit seems clear. I'll call over maintenance and a guard while you girls get comfortable. Buttermilk assures them, while she heads towards one of the guards. Chili was the first to enter the hut while Lynn and Juno shadowed. Juno was amazed at how elaborate the room was, with a large wooden pond, lukewarm to the touch. There were a couple of benches and beds, which she assumed were for those massages she heard about. Also present were shelves where the users can place their clothes and items so they aren't burdened. Come on, Juno, we are finally in a safe area, Lynn said as she removed her clothes, while Chili chose a couple of water baskets from the back wall. Before she went, she chucked her clothes into a hole while folding them. Lynn twitches her ear in annoyance, but chooses to ignore her and continues to fold her wardrobe. Juno followed the word of the small Centalope, folding her clothes and putting them on an empty shelf. The only thing she had was her replacement robe, which still unnerved her as there were similar mage robes from Alana. She swings the robe off, pausing as she stares at the repairs made with the big chunk of discolored fabric. Lynn takes notice with a flick of her ears, knowing what the tall rabbit was thinking about. It's better if you don't think about it, Lynn warns the tall rabbit, knowing that she wouldn't like the real answers. Juno rubs the patched fabric somberly, thinking back to earlier this morning, wondering how different her fate would be if Chili hadn't saved her. She gave a glance at the Lyconian, who had some baskets of water by her side, while enjoying submerging her feet in the corner where the open gutter was. She had a sponge that she grabbed at the same station as the baskets, rubbing off the stains of blood while it flowed down the gutter. Juno still found the Lyconian to be a bit terrifying and brutal in her ways. How can a being be so comfortable taking a life, she thought, while she and Lynn finished disrobing. No matter how her first impression went with Chili, the woman still saved her life. All right, stop daydreaming. Time to wash the funk and spunk before you touch the water, Lynn said, while she nudged the tall rabbit's ribs, walking towards the baskets and accessories. Lynn grabbed 2 baskets while a sponge was thrown in one of them, quickly filling them both with the small trout of clean water. Juno parrots the woman and follows her like a baby duck as they go towards the Lyconian. Lynn pulls a stool from the wall and sits right next to Chili, exchanging neutral glances before Lynn starts her sponge bath. Juno thought she didn't need a stool and opted to sit on her thighs as she took Chili's other side. The 3 started to wash their bodies, removing all the filth that they had accumulated in such a short time. So you're a mage, huh, Juno? Chili broke the short silence, which had Juno flick her ears from the sudden question. I am. My class is an intermediate life user, also majoring in herbalism and apothecary, Juno said bashfully, blushing from embarrassment as she explained her skills. She felt like she was boasting about a common practice. Many Alana scholars could learn these skills. Chili's tail wags, very much interested in her prospects. So you know what wild herbs are good for, and mixing them together to make better medicine. more definitely would take you in with just that, Chili said, while she continued with her sponge bath, throwing up a basket and pouring the whole bucket on her head. Juno flicked her ears at a new name, wondering who this Moore guy was. Lynn, as the master of exposition, filled in the tall rabbit. Moore's the leader of our ragtag group of misfits. He and his two brothers have always accepted strays into their coven as long as they have some use. Lynn said before she chucked the basket over her head, dropping a stream of water down her body. In Juno's mind, this Moore fellow seemed to be a noble man in an unforgiving land. So, are you familiar with medicine from the other world? Lynn questions with a curious tilt of the head. Juno did read books about otherworldly medicine and how to appraise it. This medicine can be the difference between life and death, and every pill can be the cost of gold. Usually found next to a body of an otherworlder, which made her pity the otherworlders. I can appraise them if that's what you mean. I know of antibiotics, pain relievers, common syrups, and treatments. Juno thought of the summary of her knowledge, for the tomes told of many medicines and their uses. Pain relievers, many treatments for general illnesses, and ointments and alcohols that clean out wounds. Cool, the only stuff that I know of are those joints that make you happy, and those tasty fruit like chewies that make you smell colors. Chili said with a bit of pride, while Lynn only shakes her head. She's referring to cannabis, a form of depressant or hallucinogen depending on how much one consumes. There are farms in many colonies that can produce joints, but many items from the other world are in the form of consumables. Those are more for selling you damn mutt. Are you sure that you sold them the last haul? Lynn said, disappointed, waving her finger at the Lyconian like she was correcting a dog. Chili laughs at her with a hit of uneasiness, telling Lynn all she had to know. She shook her head, dropping the interrogation, continuing to scrub her pelt. Those things hit the spot. I could even play with a human without ripping their face off. Chili said with a chuckle, causing the two centalopes to stop and turn their gaze at her. Juno flicked her ears at the open hostility that Chili displayed to half her race. Lynn felt like she should have some tact in the company they had. Chili, do you hate humans? Juno said in a silent voice, feeling like she already knew the answer. It was important to hear her response directly, because she is half human. Chili's tail stopped wagging, turning towards Juno with a flat expression. Hate is an understatement. I believe that the world would be better without them. Chili said her declaration like it was a natural response. Juno's heart felt a little crack, remembering her father, who was a great man in her eyes. Lynn gave a hard kick in Chili's ribs, causing the Lyconian to yelp. Damn mutt, she's half of the race you loathe. It's like you're telling her that you think she can die too. Lynn pointed out, which made Chili's color fade. She turns towards Juno, who seemed to have a major conflict with her statement. I don't see you as a human, Juno. I might have called you Haffy, but you're an earfolk. just like the rest of us. Chili consults the tall rabbit, clarifying how she sees her within the group. The clarification did relieve some tension, but she was still offended on her father's behalf. My father is a loving husband and a great dad. Mother chose him out of all the centalopes that asked for her hand. I don't know what some humans did to you, but generalizing hatred seems a bit much. Juno probed her sermon, while the Lyconian heard what she had to say. Chili seemed to be confused, not really showing any emotion. It's natural for humans to take everything from ear folk like us. Everything dear to me was lost to a human. My home, my family, my virtue and honor. My condolences to you and your mother. Having any relations with those bastards seems like a curse to me. Chili said, without a hint of malice directed at Juno, but it still stings at the tall rabbit's heart. Juno felt a rage bubbling within herself, but she bit down on her tongue. She didn't mean any harm to her. The atmosphere seemed to be rather heavy, like they were at a funeral. "Hello, would you ladies like service?" A preppy voice said from the back of the group, back at the entrance of the hut. 3 women passed through the curtain, revealing a centalope, a Tuskgate, and a Panrius. They all wore a sash over their feminine woes, showing a fair amount of skin and pelt. "Yes, please," Lynn shouted, clearing the masseuses to enter with a basket filled with fragrant items. They scattered around the room, with the centalope opening a bottle of potion and pouring it into the pool. The aroma was pleasantly wafting into the group's nostrils, smelling of lavender, sweet milk, and honey. "Ah, I can't wait," Lynn said with anticipation, rising from her stool and walking towards the body of water. Juno and Chili were left by each other, as they both avoided each other's gaze. They both didn't do it out of malice, but they seemed to not click, having different worldviews. Differences of opinion aside, the both of them rose up after splashing water over their heads, following Lynn into the bath. The boys in the back have already added wood to the furnace. "You 3 are ready for the bath," the Tuskgate masseuse said, while the other 2 slipped their feet into the water, testing if it was okay. "You don't have to tell me twice," Lynn said as she slipped into the fragrant water, releasing a huge sigh of relief after her body was submerged. The masseuses laughed sweetly, finding enjoyment in the centalope's honest demeanor. "How's the water, Lynn?" Chili asked the rhetorical question, smiling at Lynn's obvious comfort. Juno's nose flicked at the fragrant water, whetting her curiosity. "Stop with the talking and more splashing." Lynn snapped her fingers at the girls, which Chili and Juno followed without a word. They both entered the water opposite Lynn, feeling the nice tempered water wipe away the tension in their muscles. It felt like heaven. Whatever happened today was nothing but a distant memory. The girls enjoyed themselves, rubbing in the suds that were forming and itching their pelts. The Tuskgate slipped into the bath by Chili, getting awfully close to her. She believed in a proper distance between a stranger, but Chili didn't mind the woman's advances. The Sithkatul rubs her delicate hands onto Chali's abs, impressed by their volume. Don't get many customers built like you, gorgeous, the Sithkatul said while she looked at Chali with longing eyes. The sight was too lewd for Juno, who blushed from the display. The Centalope went with Lynn, which made her wave, denying the advancement. Then Juno saw the Panrius getting by her side as she avoided eye contact. I don't really swing that way, little kitten, but please keep on rubbing my fur, Chali says, with a flushed face, enjoying every moment from the woman's hands. The Sithkatul laughs at the woman's bluntness, rubbing around her toned arms and calves. Would you like me to wash you up, miss? The Panrius closes in on Juno, getting very close to her comfort level. She saw the rabbit blushing like a tomato, chuckling at her expression. The Panrius pulled away from Juno, which surprised her. It's okay, dear. The point is to relax. If you like to be alone, then just say so. The Panrius clarified, locking eyes with Chali as she waved for her to come over. The Panrius masseuse nodded her head and swam over to her open shoulder. She began to rub Chali's pelt, pleasing the Lyconian. Juno was dumbfounded, watching as the three of them were laughing and moaning. Your pelt is a very shiny miss, and you carry yourself well for being a centalope like me. The centalope masseuse complimented Lynn, who was just lying in the water. She kept on releasing a sigh of relief, which made the centalope chuckle. You sound like a mature woman having a rough day, the centalope questioned, causing Lynn to twitch from the word mature. The centalope started to wave her hands, trying to assure her that she didn't mean anything wrong. Lynn didn't really retaliate, only rubbing the back of her neck. I may be going up in years, but I'm still a refined lady. Lynn corrected her with a childish pout, dipping herself deeper into the water. The centalope turns herself towards Juno, slyly floating her way. Juno drooped her ears, already overstimulated by the lewd actions of the three opposite of her. You're really tall. May I ask if you're half-born? The centalope masseuse said with a finger on her soft and supple lips. Juno didn't know how to answer the woman, already feeling lower than birth with her group's company. Juno nods softly, staying silent as the centalope twitches her ears playfully. Wow, never met a mix before. I have to say that human genes really mix well with our species, the masseuse complimented as she inches herself closer. Juno tried to ignore the masseuse's probing, but she was flattered by her compliments. What makes you say that, if you mind me asking? Juno tilted her head at the pure-blooded centalope, wondering her reasoning. Without hesitation, the masseuse slides into her personal space, sliding down her slender hands on her belly. Juno squeaked from the sudden intimate contact, yet was too timid to announce her discomfort. You're balled in all the right places, only having some pelt on your sides and hands, yet everything yummy is smooth and silky, the masseuse said, with every stroke making the half-born redder. Lynn saw that she was reaching her limit, rising from the water and waving her hand. She's not from her. Pretty sure this one was shelter and isn't in the market with experimentation. Lynn declared, looking into Juno's eyes and seeing the glazed eyes of an unsullied maiden. The Centalope pulls away from Juno, laughing like it wasn't a big deal. Sorry, love. Never hurts trying to get extra coins while we keep you girls company. The Centalope said while she taps all of her fingers. Juno seemed to be confused. How was she acting like that would get her more coin? Lynn chuckled, reading the thoughts of the half-born and smiling. The mingling and the massages are free with the service, but it will cost extra if you are looking for a more intimate experience, Lynn said, while she circles a hand and pokes her opposite finger into it, symbolizing the act of mating. Juno didn't want that to be the conclusion, yet she screams silently as she confirms it. Why does every moment of this town have to do with depravity? Juno said, shaking her head, hiding her face under her palm. The masseuses chuckled at the half-born's naivety with a sweet voice soothing to the ear. Juno felt like she was being mocked, drooping her ears and submerging her mouth in bubbles. Every day can be your last, Juno. One should drown themselves in their desires before the reaper comes knocking. Chili pointed out, pushing away the two feeling her up. It would seem that she had enough stimulation. Juno read that canines loved the act of cuddles and pats. She did see the benefit in this line of thinking, considering that her fate was almost sealed with Rig S and his goons. Chili stood up from the bath, waving at the Panrius to follow her to a nearby massage bed. The Sithkatul pouted from being ignored. Maybe she was too aggressive in her advances. The Panrius woman looks at the cat woman smugly, then proceeds to skip her way towards the massage bed as well. The Lyconian lay on the bench, wagging her tail as she tenses her profound muscles into a stretch. The Panrius picks up one of the scattered baskets filled with toiletries and pulls a towel to dry off her drenched pelt. She rubbed the coarse, yet plush fabric onto her slicked pelt, soaking up all the excess water. She moans softly, enjoying the heat and the pressure that the women provided. Speaking of a reaper, I'll have to warn you ladies about the beast slayers sighted near the area around Tuskgate. The Sithkatul flicked her ears while she warned the three customers. The room went silent, with Chili raising her head with alertness and Lynn's ear flick of dismay. Beast slayers, Juno thought, never reading anything about those things in her studies or word of mouth. Where, Chili said with a snarl, making the group of masseuses flinch from her sudden change in tone. One word from her told Juno that she might have some history with said beast slayers. She saw this woman go toe to toe with a Baltaris, with nothing but a smile on her face. These beast slayers may be a serious threat. I heard from a guard that a customer lost her whole party after meeting one just a couple of towns away. The Panrius said as she finished drying Chili, waving the tool away and dropping it. Chili looked at her with shock. which made the Panrius hesitate in pulling out the scented oils. Lynn seemed just as worried as Chali, with her eyes widening with uncertainty. "There's more than one," Lynn said as she pulled herself out of the water, alarming the masseuses on her side. Juno felt a pattern every moment that she was in these unholy lands, always feeling lost when everyone reacted. The Centalope grabbed a hold of Lynn, urging her to relax and enter the water. They were following a large group of human knights coming from the opposite side of the triangle. The Centalope told Lynn, with a lean into her large ear canal. The longer their story gets, both Lynn and Chali's expressions lose some color. A small army of human knights was rare coming deep outside their borders, much less deep into beastkin territory. "Do any of you know what business they have up here?" Lynn asked the question with a shaking voice, which Juno noticed and started to feel her nerves tensing up. One after the other, the masseuses shook their heads, denying any knowledge of the knight's motives. Chali discards the fact of human knights, focusing more on the beast slayers. "Do you know what those beast slayer looked like? What weapons do they use?" Chali gets up from her oil bath, looking at all the masseuses frantically to see if one could answer. Many beast folk cultures have told tales of beast slayers, how they were the humans' answer to an enemy that can overwhelm them in numbers. They specialized in hunting monsters, passing their knowledge down to new generations. The term was loose to humans. Their prey would include beast folk as well. Some say that beast slayers are nothing more than cold-blooded mercenaries who would kill any sentient for coin. Others had them akin to a boogeyman, a reaper that enjoys the act of killing those who aren't them. Many races would eat their prey, bringing them back into the cycle of life. The slayers never held that belief towards beastkin, leaving the bodies to rot and skinning the pelts as trophies. One wears armor made of wolf skins, wearing the mask of a howling wolf and using a short sword. The other is wearing green scaled armor, a mask with the head of a serpent, equipped with a bald club and one of those firearms. The Panrius woman said while she shadowed Chali as she stood like a statue. Chali went silent, with an expression of past pain that Juno drooped her ears. Lynn looked at her with worried eyes, seeming to know what the Lyconian was thinking. "He's here," Chali said with unrivaled vindication. "Seen, I would have thought you had more beef with the wolf slayer than the serpent one," Juno said as she tried to keep pace with the other two. Nightfall closed quickly. They passed another village as they continued on an unmarked road, surprising Juno as they didn't seem to slow their stride. They were walking and jogging for hours, not breaking speed as Juno's stamina was near depleted. They all said goodbye to Tuskgate over 3 hours ago, finishing their baths and equipping their clothes in near silence. Lynn and Juno bowed to Aunt Cookie before they left, only to see Chali's silhouette outside the entrance. They passed by other parties, only for those who saw her face to avoid her at all cost. Before they exited the brothel, she asked about their aggression against Wolfslayer, only for Lynn to correct her that she had a problem with the Serpent Slayer. "Don't worry, that bastard will pay for what he does to my ancestors one day. But right now my blood screams for the snake's head," Chile said in a sinister tone, sharp enough to cut someone's soul. Juno realized that it was far more personal, like they had encountered him before. As she pondered to herself, the two women stopped when they saw a smoke cloud not too far from where they were. "Should be Moore and the gang," Chile said quickly, while she followed the cloud without a moment's pause. Lynn flicked her ears and twisted her body to block Juno's path before another step. It was sudden, so the half-born flinched at the action, which made Lynn chuckle. "Before we go see the crew, I gotta warn you, don't scream, don't cry, or show any fear," Lynn said, while she used her fingers as a checklist, then grabbing Juno and pulling her in the direction. Juno didn't have any time to process her warnings, but she felt like she was being played by the pureblood. Through the dense foliage, she saw the orange tint of a campfire in the clearing. She closed her eyes while she passed, trying to prevent a branch from hitting her eyes. With the last crack from a branch, she heard the sounds of lute and conversation ringing pleasantly in her ears. The smell of an open campfire, with the air smelling of smoked meat and fragrant porridge. Before she could open her eyes, she heard a deep and loud laugh echo in her ears, causing her to pause. When she finally opened her eyes, the hairs on her neck frizzed up and her legs grew wobbling. She saw a horrifying sight many tales were told to avoid these creatures. They were green and muscular, big in height, and their teeth protruded tusks. They stared at her with coal-like eyes, exactly 3 pairs of them. One was sitting by the fire, one with a scar on his left eye, and the last one towering over her while he sat. They were the apex predator of the triangle, the ones that elders would use to deter bad children. "Don't misbehave now, or you will be taken away by an orc. They love the taste of naughty children," she remembered her mother saying when she was a kitten, throwing tantrums over a toy. When she got older, there were seminars for these creatures and how dangerous they could be to a sentient. They are a nomadic race of all-male monsters, savage in nature and with a hunger that can never be satiated. They abduct ripe women of all races, using them as breeding stock and devouring the men alive. Juno shakes in her boots, regretting her blind trust in Lynn and Chile, feeling foolish for hoping. The 3 snarled at her, warning the nerves on her back to run in the opposite direction. The large one stood from his seat, towering over her 3 times the size of the Boltaurus from earlier. She listened to her gut, turning the other way, preparing her legs for a swift dash, only to be interrupted. Lynn wraps her arms around her, locking her down, preventing Juno from escaping. Lynn stood in place without fear, looking up at the towering orc with a blank stare. Juno believed that she was brainwashed by the monster, aiding in his retrieval of women. Juno thrashes in her iron grip, only to stop as the massive orc stood over her. She couldn't scream, only choking on her fear as she heard the monster's deep breaths. The beast began to reach out to her, having the frightened half-born close her eyes and accept the inevitable. She thought she could have used a binding spell, but at her level, she would only be casting flimsy strings at it. Some seconds passed, and the beast didn't do anything to her, yet she still felt his presence. Her curiosity got the better of her, only opening one eye. What she saw confused her, as the large orc presented her with a white clover with red polka dots. His fat fingers seemed to be holding the little herb with careful tenderness, betraying the violence expected of his race. Lynn lets the half-born go, tapping her shoulder with an approving nod. The blood-stained clover is one with beauty and tragedy. Its white petals illuminate with the light of hope, and its ruby spots stare at me with youthful purpose. Yet it's a clover many overlook or discard it, ripping off its lucky petals. But to those who have a different outlook, it's a gem that brings many harvests. The large orc said with a deep, yet gentle tone that calms the nerves. The orc looked down with sincere eyes, ones that weren't clouded by instinct or malice. You found another wayward soul. What causes an innocent soul far from their homeland? The orc questions Juno, looking saddened by the idea. Juno was more curious about his assumption of her being from another land. She had never met an orc that could hold a conversation. Her scholarly mind was interested in how the conversation could continue. I was taken advantage of by bad elves because I am a half-born. Many other races seem to want my existence to expire. Some elven scholars broke a priceless item and blamed me for it, putting a heavy debt on my family, one they assume I will never pay off. Juno said somberly and honestly, having the orc's eyes fill with tears. The display shocked Juno, for an orc feeling for another species was never heard of. Elves, some good, many bad. They have long lives yet get bored easily, getting jealous even easier. But coming to the triangle is dangerous. Many orc brothers still eat and rape. Many beast can eat and rape. Many humans kill. The orc said, as if he was predicting an awful omen, a long one that gave her a chance to look deeper into the camp. The large orc was covering the rest of the crew at camp, roughly a dozen people from different races. A Tuskgate female sitting on a Panthemata male's lap, two Panrius males butting heads, amusing the female. Two identical Vulpes males arguing about who pulled the most money today, and two Infenrial males wagging their tails as they hugged Chali, who was talking to a refined-looking orc. I brought home a stray. I know that she has life magic and will die out there if we don't help her out. Chali said to the refined orc, who only nodded at the information. While she sees him nodding, her tail starts to wag as if she was getting compliments from her owner. The refined orc looks at the one with a scar on his left eye, silently asking for his opinion. New blood will always be welcome if they help the Brotherhood. I trust in Chali and Lynn's judgment. They bring worthy warriors. The scarred orc said, sounding like a textbook version of an orc, with a bit of censorship. It wasn't just the large orc that had a sentient side. But all three of the brothers seemed to be reasonable. "Gardener, let the lass go for a bit. Let her introduce herself to the brotherhood." The scarred orc told the large brother, having him crane himself up and walk back to his corner. Now she saw the rest of the group staring at her, having her freeze from anxiety. Lynn didn't much care for it, pulling her to the crew next to the fire. "Her name is Juno Moore. I vouch for her induction to the clan," Lynn said while she saluted the refined orc, bowing her head as if she was in the presence of royalty. He had a lot of respect for an orc that was sitting on a stump, but it would seem that even Chali respected him. She pushes the two infernal males off of herself and prostrates herself as well. Mimicking the girls, the blonde-haired and bulky infernal prostrated themselves as well, having the refined orc unamused. "All right, court of jesters, you know how I feel about orcish playing like fools. Welcome to our club, Miss Juno," the refined orc said while he waved his hand in dismissal, with his people laughing at his straight demeanor. Juno stood in place, expecting more from the orc. After a few seconds, without a follow-up, she voiced her concerns. "That's it," Juno said, with a scratch on her chin, tugging on her patched robe. "Of course, you're lost. You have no clan. And if we leave you on your own devices, you'll either get raped, devoured, or all of the above in that order," the refined orc said bluntly, wounding the Alana scholar's pride. Yet she had to agree with his evaluation. Being a part of a group would be safer than tracking the wild alone. She heard a snarl from the side of her as she saw the scarred orc rise from his stump to size up the new meat. He got into her personal space, looking down at her with his intense face. He looks at her legs, then her sides, then her chest, causing the innocent half-born to cover herself up. The orc laughed, amused by the half-born's display of being uncomfortable. "Don't get the wrong idea, lass. I prefer a woman who has muscle on her bones, not belly-aching when she has too much meat to eat. I have a problem with how squishy you look. Until further notice, I'll call you Miss Squishy," the orc announced to the rest of the group, getting a chuckle and a laugh from all. Juno blushes in embarrassment as she hears the camp taunt her for being squishy. "Tomorrow you'll be joining in a hunt with some maid members. Some bandits are stealing from a local farm and need killing. Can you kill a little squishy?" The scarred orc taunted, unnerving the girl when he said the word killing. She never killed anyone in her life. She could never see herself as a murderer. "And no, sir," she timidly said as she looked into his blinded eye. He snarls at her, disappointed with her answer, showing weakness. He then backs away from her, walking away from the camp slowly, waiting for his brother to rise from their stumps. Juno looked around in awe as the earth shook with their weight as they followed their brother by the hip. "Then be useful until someone does it to you, brothers. Let's hunt," the scarred orc yells out to his brothers as he loses interest in the conversation. The orc brothers roared into the night, sounding like wild beasts ready to kill. Yet she noticed that Gardner charged his breath releasing a roar akin to a cosmic dragon. The brothers ran into the forest as the birds stopped chirping and the background noise became deadly silent. They stomp on the earth, causing the land to shake with each step. Surrounding trees in their way tasted the bite of their strength, crashing into them like mere obstacles made of wet paper. The earthquakes became more tame after a bit, showing how fast an orc can be. "Hunt, what are those giants going to hunt?" Juno said as she twitched her eyes at the sheer athleticism of the orc brothers. Lynn smugly walks behind Juno, patting her back as she leans into her ear by a boost from her toes. Gardeners need a lot of meat to stay off any sentient diets. They're probably going to kill 5 terror birds just to feed him alone, Lynn said, as if that amount was normal, which made Juno look at her with awe. A terror bird was a carnivorous basilisk that was the height of a sentient, twice its weight, which means that it was over 300 pounds a bird. "Hey, good thing you're half-breed." Most of the time, Gardner comes with some breakfast meat the next day, the bulky Infenriel said, while his tail wagged with sincerity, getting an elbow from the blonde one with natural drooping ears. "What the hell was that for good boy?" the bulky Infenriel said to the golden retriever Infenriel, while Goodboy snarled at his ignorance. "Just because she is a half-born doesn't mean she eats meat, Bullwag. Be more mindful of that." Goodboy scolds Bullwag while he looks at him in confusion. "Are you too retarded?" Julie said to them both, crossing her arms to show her annoyance. "I eat meat, only a little," Juno added as she signed a pinch for measurement. Goodboy yelps from embarrassment, assuming her dietary constraints were racist on his part. Bullwag, well, he wags his tail, walking towards the half-born with a handshake. "Hear that, Goodboy? Half-born knows half-born. We need to stick together with all these purebreds around now, do we, Juno?" Bullwag pointed out, which made Juno pause to investigate his claim. His pelt finishes off from his forearm, his canines are smaller, and his teeth are more human-like. Juno recognizes him as a half-born, grabbing his hand with both hers as she shakes his palm violently. "Oh my God, it's so nice to meet another half-born. May I ask if your other half is human?" Juno was really passionate about his answer, because the world would feel a little bit smaller if it were so. "My mom was a liberated human, and my father saved her from slavers because he was a true male." Bullwag gave a thumbs up to his claim, being proud of his father's good deeds. Juno's chest swelled up with a lot of dopamine, loving how romantic that sounded. "We have another half-born on our crew. The only difference is she's mixed with Panrius and dwarves." He grabbed Juno's shoulder and pointed at the Panrius gang's female, slamming mugs of ale like they were water. She was amused by the 2 males getting into an arm wrestling contest to see which one was stronger. Juno was a little surprised how she seemed like a normal Panrius woman, because dwarfs were naturally hairy creatures. When she looked at her deeply, the hints to her lineage became true. Minus the high consumption of alcohol, she had a little more brawn compared to her full pedigree sisters. She did seem a tad shorter, seeming to be around the same size as Lynn. The Panrius female takes notice, smiling at the group while she fills an extra empty mug with a nearby barrel. She flipped her bangs and gave a wave with her hand. "What's up, Squishy? Nice to meet ya." The name's Ramai. I love booze. Hick, do you love booze? She gets in close to Juno, wafting the heavy smell of ale into her nose. Juno couldn't help it, her nose scrunched over the strong odor. Ramai took her act of pulling away as a sign that she wasn't interested in the spirits. "I'll take that as a no," Ramai said as she swirls the ale around in an unstable stance, seeming to almost fall by a sliver of footing. She looks at Lynn and pushes the ale into her arms as she gladly accepts the drink. "I can always count on you for being fun." Ramai taps Lynn on the shoulder, chugging her large mug with great thirst. Lynn sips the ale softly and in moderation, appeasing the half-born Panrius as she waddles back to the two males in feud. She may be a bit obnoxious. When she's drunk, she's sweeter when sober, Lynn said as she watched the back of Ramai, telling Juno what she thought. She seemed well, turning back to the group and waving. Juno notices that she wasn't waving at her as Bulwag returned her wave. Then the group heard the two Panrius males stopping as Ramai slung her arms around their necks. "These two are my childhood pals, Billy and Yukon. They might butt heads every day, but they're always glued to each other's hip." She showed the new blood her blushing friends, more focused on their body heat than on the introduction. It was clear that they both liked the same female. Maybe that's why they are so focused on seeing who is better. "Sup, HI," the two Panrius said to Juno, then getting back to their arm wrestling contest. The back talked to one another, saying things like "your strength is as soft as your horns," or "bet you can't even climb mountains." Their banter entertains Ramai, as she forgot about the group and just joined in with their ideal banter. Goodbye waved for the girls to come closer to the fire, joining the rest of the group. Juno didn't want to be the odd one out, joining them as they went to sit and dine for the night. She was more distracted by the two felines in the group, acting rather lewdly. The big male looked like a panthimata, a larger version of a sithcatul that can grow a large beard known as a mane. He licks the sithcatul female's head passionately, while he rubs her rear with a tight grip. The female rubs her scent on the male's chest, laughing playfully as she swirls her tail intently. "Ignore them. These cats are always in heat." Chili passes the two of them with an empty bowl, refusing to look their way. The sithcatul seemed to take notice of her jab, swinging herself out while she firmly planted her legs down next to the large panthimata. Seems like a little bit of jealousy from a hound that can't get any, the sly cat said as she scoffs at the Lyconian, visibly annoying Chili with a grin. Chili remained quiet while she poured herself a bowl of the meat stew, mixed with a good ratio of fatty sausages and aromatic spices. Goodboy and Bullwag sat by her side, while Juno and Lynn sat opposite them. The cat seemed to be an avid shit-stirrer, digging into the Lyconian's nerves. You would be much happier if you weren't so choosy about your males. You should just let one of those hounds excavate your cavern filled with cobwebs and drought. The feline points at Goodboy and Bullwag, with the former wagging his tail at the suggestion, while Bullwag ignored her claims while he fishes for sausage. Chili stares daggers at the panting infenrial, causing the male to whimper from being rejected. Now that he knew his place, Chili filled her bowl, then gently placed it on the floor. She rose back up, shooting herself up with a snarl. Can't let me eat food without starting shit, you half-pint hoeing bitch. Chili announced with a roar, wrinkling her forehead from all of her building anger. The feline reaches for her mate for a tender kiss, pulling out as she boops his nose before she gets up. The feline's tail gets poofy and gets into Chili's face without a hint of fear. She was a couple of inches smaller than Chili, but that didn't stop her dilating her eyes to a challenger. Ah, look at the tough little puppy, so brave even when daddy's not home. The feline taunts Chili as if she were a child, causing the Lyconian to growl at her. The feline added fire, bringing her ears back as she hisses at the Lyconians' faces. It seemed like violence was going to break out, with the Panthimata leaning back to see the show. The rowdy Volpe's brothers seemed to be more interested in the ladies' conflict than their bickering, as they both were cheering. Fight, 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 fight. Kiss, 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 kiss. Each brother yelled out the resolve, one wanting to see blood, the other wanting to see spice. The group was getting loud. Juno was getting overwhelmed at how quickly things turned for the worse. She turned to Lynn to see her reaction, only to hear her hiccup with a flushed face. Ramai looks at Lynn with a wide open mouth, flexing her dimples in excitement. Lynn looks at her with a smug look, having Ramai saluting her comrade in arms. The two had a game plan, with Lynn circling over to the feline as Ramai tiptoed towards Chili. Juno didn't know what the two were planning to do, but it would seem to pacify the two women. Ramai was directly behind Chili, while the Panthimata male was in Lynn's way. He looks at Lynn with a smirk and her with a drunken smile as she straightens her back and flicks her ears. Reinhardt, can you be a dear and let little oldie me through? Lynn said playfully to the large cat, which he immediately granted. Be my guest, Reinhardt said as he pushed himself a few inches away so Lynn could have a straight shot at the feline. Then the two assumed their positions, crouching their legs and anchoring their strength to the ground. Ramai counts to 3 with her fingers, dropping to 0. They rushed at the two, putting their weight to shove them. With a firm nudge, the two locked lips for a second, pulling away quickly while they both spat on the floor. The majority of the group laughed at the two, while one of the brothers crossed his arms in disappointment. Juno covered her eyes with a flush, being a little curious while she opened a gap with her fingers. Yet she noticed the other brother being awfully quiet, turning her gaze to the Volpes. She chuckled as one of the Vulpes was silent in prayer, with a tear flowing down his cheek. "Thank you, Lord," he said as he croaked his words. "Machi," Reinhardt asked for the feline's name, as she was busy spitting out the nasty dog taste from her mouth. Once it was enough, she arched her back and locked eyes with her mate. That was an extremely hot babe. Reinhardt gave her a thumbs up with a twinkle in his eye, like he was enlightened. Machi rose up without a word and walked up towards her mate. She blunts her clawed hands and slaps Reinhardt across the face, leaving a red mark. "You can sleep outside the tent tonight," Machi screamed as she stomped away into the forest, having Reinhardt go after her with apologies. Lin and Ramai both laughed to the point where their sides hurt, having Chili drooping her ears in sadness. Lin walks towards the Lyconian when she is on all fours, tapping on her back. "You're so sensitive when it counts," Lin said in a teasing manner, having the Lyconian pout while she avoided eye contact. Chili gets up and decides to call it a night after that, silently heading towards an open tent. Lin didn't even care, for she was too drunk to care, as she took a solid gulp of the ale. She then turns towards the Vulpes brothers, pointing a finger at them with gusto. "Finn and Fen, start the music," she commanded, as the two brothers looked at each other blankly, then shrugged it off. The violent brother pulled out a pair of claims that wrap around the palms, while the perverted one pulled out his lute and pulled a couple of chords. Once they had a nice chime, the two drunkard women danced around the fire as Good clapped them on. "Oh, bless me with gold or silver, the Lord of all believers. Make my death be swift and my pain wither. The Lord of all believers. Show me where to find her. Oh, show me where to find her. In my final days, with my final words. Oh, show me where to find her." The two erupted into song as they spun around the fire, pickled far from their arses. They look so free, Juno thought as they swirled around, eating and drinking with the company of others. They weren't bound by anybody's thoughts or approval, which she had never tried before. Spinning around seemed fun, but she would be too embarrassed if she just joined in now. Out of nowhere, Bullwag came to her with a bowl of stew and a mug of ale, and handed them both over. "You seem too stiff. Have some of my personal brew and stew, made a pot with strictly vegetables for Lin, and everyone loves wine," Bullwag pointed out, having the fellow half-born smell the stew intently. It was made with heavy cream, carrots, potatoes, and spices that really whet the appetite. It was suitable for a herbivore to eat, which she could appreciate a bowl of spiced veggies. The wine didn't devour all of the fruit's natural sugar, having a hint of berries with a bit of the spirit. "Thanks, Bullwag. This is really a kind gesture." She thanked him as he took a knee beside her as she slowly consumed the bowl. Even if the wines had less alcohol, she wasn't used to drinking anything with alcohol, as she gave out an innocent hiccup. She and Bullwag chuckled as he filled himself a mug with the false wine. Both of them get distracted by the fact that the brother with the lute stopped playing, seeing him on the floor with his face in a bowl of meat stew. If Juno remembers correctly, that was Chali's bowl before she left. It still has her flavor, the Vulpes said while he devoured it without any tack. The night was still long, and Bulweg's brew was very refreshing as they both killed the bottle. Afterward, she was more acceptable to peer pressure, drinking a mug of ale that Ramai passed to her. She remembered that she was in the middle of a coordinate dance, locking arms as they waved their legs in unison. After that memory, she didn't know how the night ended as she drifted to sleep, curled up next to a soft and warm body.